Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to see you, except I can't really see you because it's a bit dark and there are like lots of shadowy figures sitting down in the audience. So I'm going to talk to you about microservices. At least I'm going to talk to you about how we use microservices where I work at the moment. I'm not going to go into massive technical depth, though, because it's more about... What? Come back. Right. Wait a minute. Let me just... Don't know what's happened there. Right, I'm going to do a thing where I change the settings so that it doesn't go to sleep, which I'd forgotten to do. Let's put that on to never. Okay, hopefully this will work. Right, okay. So, sorry for that interruption. I haven't done any presenting for like a few weeks, so I'm a bit rusty. So I want to talk about how we use microservices, and in particular, how we deal with some of the microservices which are shared, and how we maintain them. Because I think that there are a lot of interesting ideas people have about microservices that I think don't always turn out to be true in actual implementations of microservices. So, I'm a software engineer working at a company called TES, which I'll tell you a bit more about TES in a minute. I work remotely from home, so this is the first time I've been to London for a few months, which is quite nice. And I have kind of since about 2000 been very interested in agile and extreme programming ways of working, so kind of predating the software craftsmanship movement a bit, but know lots of people within the software craftsmanship movement, I would guess. So, a bit about TES. So, who has actually heard about TES and know who TES are? This is very few people, right? The thing is that whenever I say, this is the normal response if I say I work for TES. TES stands for Times Educational Supplement. And I'll go on and explain a little bit more about our business, but basically, we're an education company. A digital education company. We have a resource marketplace where teachers can sell teaching resources, lesson plans, things like that. And we also have a big business around jobs in teaching, so schools can advertise for roles and people can apply on our site. And there are quite a lot of different aspects to our what might seem like just a simple website. The system was originally written using Angular, and also there's some PHP bits. But then about 5 years ago, we had a new CTO called Clifton Cunningham, and he came in and he brought a new team in, and they rewrote everything using microservices. And actually, Clifton has given several talks about how that architecture was put together. I joined kind of after this has become well settled, and about 3 years down the line, and actually Clifton is no longer the CTO, and so the people who did the transition, many of those have moved on. So we're in a situation where we are now a team that was built using this microservices approach, and it's no longer the new thing. It's the normal thing that we do and the normal way we work for all our stuff. We deliberately recruit full stack engineers, but they're full stack JavaScript developers. So they are, React on the front end, Node on the back end. And we have what we call a remote first culture, which means that anyone can work from home. And that turns out to mean that a lot of people work from home if you can work from home all the time. So that's what we do. And that means we have people dispersed across different countries. So that does play a part in how we architect our systems. This is kind of the mission of TES. It's all about the power of great teaching and supporting and connecting teachers and schools and helping to improve children's lives through education. So that's kind of feels like a nice thing to be part of. Previously, I was working in the advertising domain, and that feels less like a nice thing to be part of, where you're kind of squeezing adverts into the web pages that people are browsing. Now, before I go any further, I want to do some sort of questions to get a sense of what kind of background of people are here. I apologize if this was already done yesterday. I didn't arrive till yesterday afternoon. So who would say, and their primary language is JavaScript development? There's a few people. Okay, all right. So I'm not going to show any JavaScript in this talk, but I think it's definitely much more web development that we do, and so the scale of the systems that we're building is not necessarily like a system in a bank. And most of the things, apart from the payments, most of the things, it's okay. They can fail sometimes, and it's not the end of the world. Another question, who is using microservices? Right, okay, all right, so a few more people. Now, when microservices were more of a new thing, there was definitely this idea you would just, write a microservice and then throw it away and, just rewrite it. Who here has rewritten a microservice? So fewer people? And I think we have rewritten some microservices, but it's not the main thing that we do. We don't think of them as, write and throw away. We think of them as, we're building this, and we're building this to last, and we're expecting this to be maintained over a number of years. Who here has had to build code that is maintained by other people? So it's not always easy to get the right level of documentation and for somebody else to be able to pick it up, know how it works, be able to change it. We aspire to write services that are easy to maintain, but it's not always the case that things are easy to maintain. And actually, the longer that things are left untouched, the harder it becomes to change them. So things that are stable, nobody wants to touch them after a while. So microservices, I think there was a big buzz around microservices, and a few years ago, Fred George was giving talks about how you could write them in any language, and just write little services and then throw them away, and you wouldn't perhaps need to do tests because they were so disposable. I think the services that we call microservices, perhaps they should be called macro services, because they're not tiny, tiny little things. They are services that are reasonably chunky, that we would have a team of people working on for, months, if not years, and maintaining over time. So we're not thinking of throwaway software. And one of the things that we've done is, instead of kind of thinking, oh yeah, just write it in whatever language you fancy, we very much standardize and say, well, we expect you to use these technologies. We expect you to make things similar to the existing ones that we have. And there is a balancing act to be had there, because if you're trying to make stuff to fit in with things that have been written before, it feels a bit like a restriction, basically. And so there's a tricky thing about balancing innovation and creativity with keeping things the same. And actually, it turns out that just as you recruit a variety of different people to work in your team, we have some people who are more excited about innovation and trying lots of new stuff. And I have to say, the JavaScript world is full of new stuff and new libraries and new ways of doing things. So we have some people who are very keen on rewriting and keeping fresh, and other people who are much more just like, let's make this solid and safe and use good craftsmanship practices to ensure that we know it's working and that we can tell that it continues to work through monitoring and those kind of things. The way that our services communicate, normally there would be some front-end application. We would use REST to communicate to the back end. And if we need to request information from other services, each service will probably have its own database. But if I need to get some data from another service, I would make a request using a Rabbit message queue. So there's definitely this kind of, we plumb the services together using a standard approach. And once you have enough enough microservices written in a similar way, it turns out people keep up this way of working. However, and I rewatched the original talks that our ex-CTO gave this morning, because I thought I'd better be consistent with what he said. And he was talking about something that is kind of close to my heart, which is that basically software architecture is inextricably linked with people architecture. If you are going to have envisage a system where there are lots of small services, it actually helps to have lots of small teams. And so these are actually all of the developers I work with. We get together once a year for an engineering week. We don't, and then a lot of the time you don't see people for many months, apart from over Slack or Zoom video conferencing. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're organized into teams. So the way that we actually organize the people is that they are in what we would call product development squads. So typically you'll have 2 or 3 developers who are actively doing the development on a vertical slice of the product. So, I mean, I've worked on tools for building marketing campaigns, and I've worked on tools for the application form, and I've worked on, I'm now just switched over to working in the data team. But you normally have 2 other people that you will be pairing with. You don't have a team of 8 people or 10 people. So you actually all have a very aligned view of where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do. You work with a product manager, and the product manager is often responsible for like 1 or 2 vertical slices, so they're not there all the time. You would normally expect to have some other people from the business also involved in your squad. So we have actual domain experts who work with our software development teams. We might have a UX person or somebody who's looking at the design as well. So there's kind of a bunch of specialists. What we don't have are any business analysts producing requirements, and we don't have any testers. So we are responsible for whether our software works, we are responsible for deploying our software, and we are responsible for supporting it. So, if people find that it's not working, we have to repair it, and we don't hand it over to a maintenance team. We do, however, have a separate group of people who specialize on the details of the deployment, the infrastructure, sort of this kind of SRE type role. And so we use tools where we effectively kind of go, right, I'm deploying my product, and I usually just click on a button that has an arrow on a cloud, and it zooms away somewhere. But we are responsible for deploying. We would normally deploy features as they are ready, so I would expect to be deploying things kind of every other day or perhaps several times a day, depending on what we're working on. There are some other cross-cutting teams, and the team that I've just moved to is the data team, so I'm now going to be working with the data pipeline. And we also have a security team, and they are kind of a roving group of people who try and make sure that we're following good data security principles. And especially this kind of emerged with GDPR stuff last year. The leadership is quite light touch, and I knew I'd forgotten something when I said, we've got these developers and we've got a product manager. We also have a principal engineer who works with each team. And sometimes they usually have 2 teams that they're working with, but they're usually quite a light touch person. So they tend to be the person who goes to a lot of meetings and we don't see much of the day. If I was to do a PR, I wouldn't expect the principal engineer to be reviewing it. I would expect, the other developers to be reviewing it. But they do have some technical oversight over what we're doing, and they have the big picture across all of the teams of what's going on and whether there are initiatives that need to happen. We also have this funny role, which in this picture is this red hat on this green person, and that is a project parent. And they are the person who's kind of more responsible for the agile meeting type things like stand-ups and retrospectives and stuff. And all I would say is that our approach to agile is quite lightweight. So there's not a great deal of meetings about estimating things or, things are, I would say most teams are, in our organization, we have retrospectives every now and again. The main thing that we do is we have a stand-up every day. And so it's kind of a light, agile process. When we are trying to build services that we know other people are going to be using and maintaining, so something that's going to be shared, it's important to think about packaging it. So to think, how can I make the thing that I'm building obvious, small, have a discrete responsibility, so people know, this thing does that, I can use it for that. So part of building shared services is thinking about your consumption model. So like, who's going to consume it? What do they need to be able to use it? Guidance on how to use it. And then there's a different side of it, which is who is going to maintain it. And I'll come on to that. One thing that we have built, and this is not a microservice, but it's something that is throughout our microservices, and it is an aspect of sharing, is we have a style guide, and the style guide is not just you shall do this or you shall do this. It's not like a sort of advice guide. It contains CSS styles for typography, colors, all of this kinds of things to make sure that basically each service that you work on has a common way of applying styles. The styles are the same. You can change them in one place, and it ripples across all of the components that are using those styles. And it has a bunch of React components that you can pick up and use and are styled in the appropriate way. I thought I would just open it in the other tab so you could kind of see what it's like. So it has guidelines. You can just copy the code. You can see this is the actual thing. This is like the thing I might be wanting to use. This is how this popover works. So I think, oh yes, I want to pop over. Right, I go to the style guide. I copy this code. And we also use a storybook so we can illustrate how all of the components work. So that's one level of sharing that we do across the microservices. And I have to say it works very well. And it's surprising. You think, well, who maintains this? Who built this? How do we manage changes in it? It's not the explicit ownership of any one person. There is no person who would say, right, I am the person in charge of this style guide. We have what people, whoops, sorry, didn't mean to gesture wildly. Right, so we have, was anyone in talks yesterday where people mentioned the Spotify model? I heard it mention at least 2 things yesterday. And the Spotify model is this idea that you have guilds, where you have people who are representatives in a community of interest across different teams, and they get together and they do things together that are a cross-cutting concern. So our front end, we have people who develop this front-end system, but they only do it on a kind of a part-time basis on one day a month. And there is a front-end day, and on the front-end day, if you're interested in front-end development, you go and do front-end things. And most teams, there's no limit on your team. You don't have to have exactly one rep go on front-end day. It could be 2 people, it could be everybody, it could be... I don't think there's any team where there's no people, but it's optional, but it gets built because there are passionate people who want it to be good and care about how we do our front-end development. So this is where it comes back to people again. If you have people who are passionate about good quality software, about building the right thing, then, and you have an enabling structure where they're able to get time to do it, then they can build something that's useful to everyone, and then that means that we are able to have, somebody who's not necessarily brilliant at front-end development, like such as myself. CSS is not my forte. I'm able to go to this guide, pick up some code, plonk it in my thing, and have a neatly styled button that has some rounded corners and not a rounded corner and a nice shadow, which I would not have been able to do as consistently as if I had to write it myself every time. So we have that style of sharing. The other kind of sharing we have is, and these were kind of written before my time, that there are a number of services that do a very simple and discrete function that any service might want to use, such as I can send a URL to a service and it will build a PDF document and put it on S3. Or I can send a message to a service and it will then generate an email or an SMS message. So these services are very small and don't really contain any domain logic that outside their purpose. You know, they are like, I'm a service, I do just exactly this thing that it says on the tin, no more and no less. And they are stable, and they're like plumbing between the services. But it's a way of, again, it enables us to make it, we don't have to keep writing this in each of the teams. We've got a way of reusing it. So here's an example, and I just wanted to illustrate, we have a proper nice README, so it says each service will kind of say, this is what this is, here's how you use it, and I just cut off the README at this point, but there's like a lot more. So we take the attitude that, if you're going to make a service available to people, this is what I meant about packaging things for consumption. You try to make it so it's easy for people to find, that they see what it is providing examples, that kind of thing. We also have some things that we have open sourced. I would say, and actually this is another question I want to ask you. So who here has open sourced something that they built at work? Few people, right. And then, did you find that anyone used the thing that you open sourced? Anybody find that it became popular and many people were using it? Yes, well that's nice. But a lot of the time, we open source a thing because we think, oh, this is useful, other people might use it. But we don't necessarily go that extra mile to kind of promote it and explain what it is. And so people don't find it, and actually probably we're the main users of these things. But they exist anyway, so we have, I think, about 27 things that are available as open source things. And we haven't updated our logo on this page. it's the wrong logo. So what happens when we need to change something and it is one of these stable utility services, or it's one of the open source products, or it's just a sort of module that has been around for a while and nobody has used it recently? Well, the kinds of reasons that people want to change things are there's a new version of Node, there's a new version of React. Anyone been using the NPM audit facility? Yeah, so you get all these notifications of vulnerabilities. Oh no, we've got to go and update loads of things. Some of these products have not been touched for a while. And so it's actually very rarely that there are new features required. Once you've got something that has a very discrete purpose, you probably don't need to have any extra features that it does. But people are often afraid, I would say. Has anybody been afraid to change some software? So and typically, why are you afraid? You're afraid you might break it. And so it's really, really important that anything that is shared has been really well reviewed by people in the organization. So not just you just don't make a thing and say, right, there you go. It needs to have good support and people, many eyes checking it's all right. And hopefully they will say things like, but this doesn't appear to have any tests, and we need to have tests. And so we are quite strong on tests, documentation, and also, if people do ask to put something of convenience for their particular usage of a shared thing, we normally actually try to resist and say no, and say, look, that's very specific to your usage of this shared thing, so we'll just try and keep it pure and simple, and as it says, just doing the service that it's built for. So when do we get time to attend to these? Because the thing is, most product teams are busy building applications. We have quarterly OKRs, we've got goals within the business we're working towards. So who has time to maintain shared stuff? Well, we have built into our month, our working month, we have time to do these kinds of things. And I think that's kind of essential, because the thing is that although it takes time to maintain shared things to a good standard of quality, it also saves time when you come to be able to take something and use it. You have to invest less time. So it's not just maintaining shared stuff is a drain on our project. Maintaining shared stuff enables us to build things quickly, and so it's worthwhile us investing in it. So I mentioned the front-end days, and they are, like, I think every last Thursday of the month. And we also have hack days. And hack days are a time when everybody in engineering kind of says they won't be available to their product teams, and they can work on anything that they like. But it's usually relevant and related to the business in terms of improving code, building something that supports new features that have not been prioritized potentially. And we have I'm actually missing the hack days while I'm at this conference. So I've been trying to keep up with them on Slack while I've been away. What we do is we have a session on the Wednesday where everybody pitches ideas. They say, oh, here are all the things I want to work on. And then we form, I would say we just pair across different teams. So it's not, nobody says, you, and you will be working on this, you. It's totally self-selecting. So everybody kind of sets their stall out with their idea and says, I'm going to be over here in this Slack channel, and I'm going to be proposing this idea. And then you wait for people to come and pair with you and work on your idea. And usually it works really well. There's a showcase at the end where people demonstrate what they've built. It's a way of demonstrating your skill for people to, I think it helps people get kudos around the organization by, like what they built on hack days. And that kind of feeds this desire to, or culture of wanting to make things better. We are about to try doing some tech debt days, and the first one is scheduled next week. And we've just started to make a new GitHub repo for tickets, but there's only 3 tickets there at the moment, and I've created one of those. So I'm not sure if there's going to be enough tech debt for us to guarantee we can have this tech debt day. The other thing that we've got going is a DX group. Who's heard about DX? I will explain what it is. All right, so DX stands for developer experience. Who here has heard of UX? Hopefully, loads of people, right. DX is what UX is, but thinking about code and the developer experience in working on code. So to improve DX, you're looking to improve the quality and the navigability of your system, the ability for it to clearly speak to what it's doing, and so and that our systems should be built cleanly and to an appropriate standard, I would say. So this new DX group is being led by people who are called system engineers, and they are responsible for kind of, aside from the principal engineers, they are responsible for kind of promoting good practice around the organization to the engineers, basically. So there are some things we do to make it easier to navigate around the code base. One is a very simple thing around naming conventions, so what we call projects. There's a kind of a formula for that, and adopting kind of common way of naming things within the projects. We have an engineering guide. Anyone can change the engineering guide. It is a shared thing. I'm gonna, I think, have I got it? Oh yeah, that's what the engineering guide looks like. You can see there's an edit button. You would, if you're gonna make a big change, you probably would do a PR. And it's got lots of things around how our tech stack works, how do I do this, that, or the other. And again, this is the kind of thing where we're investing, so map of the engineers, list of the champions, list of the internal tools. So this is kind of a place where you can find out what can I use. We also have tech standards. The tech standards are actually proposed as GitHub issues, and there's a debate on the tickets, and then we come up with a decision, and we make an agreement about what's going to be the standard going forward. And we have very open channels on Slack, where if you can't find a thing, that we have a Slack channel called Techie Chat, and you can just ask in that channel, where can I find this, or how does this work? And sometimes it does feel like you ask a question, you're like, where can I find this? And it feels like, you know, maybe tumbleweed is going past. But then somebody will say, oh yeah, you can find this here. And I think part of what promotes the culture for people responding, it's something to do with us working remotely. So if you can imagine, if lots of people work remotely, it's harder to kind of showcase your skills and look here, this is why I'm good. So people use the visible channels in Slack to kind of go, look, I'm a helpful person, I'm helping people. Oh, look, I'm getting kudos through helping people. And I think our remote culture actually means that people are more helpful. It's one of the things that struck me when I joined the company. So I've been there nearly 2 years, and I think it's, when I compare other places I've worked, is far more helpful in terms of you can ask a question and you can expect other people to answer and to make time to help you, support you. So not just, oh yeah, just look over here in this document, but people will very often offer to pair with you and to actually help you work through a problem. So that is what I meant when I said that the people and the architecture are very closely intertwined. It's the culture is enabling the architecture to work. Oh, that's just a picture of the engineering guide, which you have already seen. So here are some other cultural things that we do that I think enable our culture. So sometimes we have bad outages. Anybody work in a company where there are bad outages occasionally? right? So it doesn't happen all. I'm not saying this is not a daily occurrence, but maybe every month, every couple of months, there'll be something that went badly wrong. We have a Slack channel called the War Room, where people will go and immediately try to help with the incident, and a group of people will be kind of assigned to work on a problem that's causing a bad production issue. But afterwards, there will always be a post-mortem report that is circulated around the whole of the team, so that everybody finds out what the solution was, what the problem was, what caused the whole thing. And that level of, instead of being afraid and covering up mistakes, we actually try to say, look, this is something that happened, this is what caused it, so that people can generally be educated. And it's not just that we don't just say, oh, look, there's a markdown document with a post-mortem report over here. Somebody will do a knowledge sharing thing where they will actually give a talk and explain what happened. Maybe it'll just be 5 minutes of saying, like, I did this and this happened. And those are recorded and you can play back those videos. So that's one thing that we do. We have a bunch of different champions for things. And this is self-selecting. So if you want to help with a company blog, you have to say, I want to help with a company blog. And then you normally have a champion and a deputy champion. And the idea is that you kind of rotate those over. So at the moment, I'm the tech standards champion. And I have somebody else who's working as the deputy champion, and they will eventually take it over. And they're doing some things on hack days at the moment to turn that into a better way of making our tech standards visible. There's this attitude of helping others that I mentioned. Something I haven't talked about is that we have a mentoring scheme. Who here has a mentor at work? So a few people, right? So where I work, everybody has a mentor, and you would have a call once a week. No, once every 2 weeks, to have some support from a mentor in the personal challenges that you've got. And so this mentoring means that everybody gets listened to. So if you are a developer and you're working in a team where there's perhaps some dispute or something where you're unhappy that things are not going in the right way, you can raise it with your mentor. Your mentor can raise it with the principal engineer or raise it with the VP of engineering, or try and kind of, sorry. Can you still hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, sorry, it just fell off my ears. I don't know why. And so mentoring, I think, is another technique we use to underpin our communications and support network for people building good quality code. And the last thing on this list is knowledge sharing. And so every week we have a time slot for knowledge sharing, and people will, sometimes it's lightning talks, or sometimes it's longer talks. People will give if I was at a conference like this, I would be going back to my company and I would be giving a talk to my colleagues about what I learned at the conference. And that's a really good way to consolidate your knowledge, but it's also a good way for people to feel like we're in a culture of learning, and and that kind of encourages more people to share what they learn, and then we all learn from each other. So this is kind of another technique that can be used. So, although it sounds a bit corny, kind of saying sharing is caring, a really important underpinning of the whole way we work is that people care about quality and they care about collaboration. And so when we're trying to improve the developer experience for each other, our culture is reflected in the code quality. We take the responsibility to improve, and we care both about the consumers of our software, which are usually other developers, and the maintainers, which are also other developers. So, summing this up, key to this working is hiring craftspeople who care about writing tests, who care about good refactoring, who care about writing quality code. Having technical oversight, but not in a heavy-handed way. We don't have any architects. We don't have any people who can whose official role it is to kind of say, I am the technical authority over you. We have principal engineers and system engineers who are more consulted, and they then work across the organization to notice common patterns. We have very open communications using Slack, and all of these things kind of support our software architecture so that we have this system which could be total chaos with all of these microservices, but actually because of the strong communication between the teams, it's actually working for us and is an enabler of our delivering products. We're able to develop products more quickly because of the way that we work. So that's all I have to say. I don't know if there's time for questions. We are hiring, so get in touch if you want to work in the JavaScript world, but I suspect it looked like most of you are not JavaScript developers anyway. I think we are open to people who are not JavaScript developers. I joined not knowing any JavaScript, so and I'm still there. Okay, thank you. So I don't know if we've got time for questions.
Yeah, I've got time for 1 or 2 questions. Yeah.
I don't know if there are any.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question. How do you present the results of your hack days?
How do we what?
How do you present the results of your hack days with everyone working
Oh,
remotely?
right, okay. So we have a Slack channel for hack days. We have a spreadsheet where all the ideas are pitched. Each idea that's pitched has a Slack channel for itself for people to discuss. And then we have a hack day showcase where people will demonstrate, by video sharing, go, look, here is the thing I built, it works like this. Might not always be, it might be, it's still working locally, it may not have made it all the way to fully to production, but yes, it's meant to be a sort of demonstrate your code working session. And they're normally, I would say, 8 to 10 things that are demonstrated, and most of them continue on. They don't just die after hack days. I would show you the spreadsheet, but I don't know if there's any secret things in there, so I don't want to kind of divulge secret stuff.
Thank you.
There's a question.
Hi, hello, here.
Ah.
In a slide you showed cross-functional product team. Can
Yes.
you explain that a little bit better and how product team across different squads, or sorry, not squads, teams interact? You may have impacts from other teams. How you handle that?
Yeah, so it turns out, in our organization anyway, we're able to have quite independent vertical slices. So for instance, there is a team for teaching resources, and that's totally disconnected with job application forms. There aren't some teams that have to talk. Like there's a talent matching service that's very closely connected with job applications, and they have more interaction and a little bit more shared code. In terms of the structure of the teams, there tends to be a product manager, principal engineer, and then the software developers, and then usually somebody from the business who is involved directly in whatever the thing is. If it's jobs, it might be somebody who handles the emails from people from the schools saying, why did my form not display properly, or that kind of thing. Does that answer your question? I can always talk to you afterwards if you want more detail, because I don't want to kind of bore everybody with, like, I don't know, too much detail. I don't know.
Hi. Do you regularly all get together?
Only once a year. So I have given a number of talks about how our remote first culture works, and I wasn't really specifically going into this in this talk, but basically, physically we get together once a year, and that means people flying in from other countries. Around the year, maybe a team might get together if somebody happens to be in London. I know that a few people are doing an ultra marathon next week, so there's going to be a few people around. Sometimes there is a conference on, and people come in for the conference. But most of our interactions are over video calls, and I'm quite often working with people who are in another country. Like at the moment, I'm working with somebody who's in Berlin. Before that, I was working with somebody who was in Hungary, and so those people only come for the once a year things, not for the, if we say, oh look, you can have a free lunch, it's not going to tempt them from Berlin really. But we have a lot of, through things like the knowledge sharing, where people are giving knowledge shared talks, through the hack days, there is opportunity to work with people who are not in the same team as you, and that helps people to get to know each other. So I don't know if that helps answer. Have I used up all the time?
Yeah, it's getting, I think that's probably the last question. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so we've got another break now.